welcome David Cay Johnston to the show.
Well, hello there, Kim.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. It's good to see you. How was your vacation?
It was terrific. Just terrific.
Where did you guys go?
Amsterdam, Dublin, Northern Ireland, Iceland.
Wow.
Half a week each. Half a week each.
That is amazing. I'm so glad you did that. Took the time to do it. Wow. Well, welcome home. Welcome back to the Mark Thompson Show. I don't know if you've seen or heard the clip that we played earlier, the Trump audio clip.
Oh, yeah.
But it seems to me, and I was just talking with Jim Avila about this, it seems to me even more damning than the transcript. I think Jim Avila agreed. What's your take on this?
Well, let's go back to 2015 and 16 when Donald was running for president, and he said, anybody who misuses classified material, we're going to go after them. We're going to prosecute them. He then signs a law that upgrades the penalties for such stuff. There's currently 2 people serving sentences of 4 years and 7 years for mishandling documents. One of them was someone with security clearance who simply took some papers home overnight, apparently multiple nights, so he could work at home. And they got sentences of 4 years and 7 years. And when you listen to the tape where Donald makes light of this, he expresses complete disregard for the national security interests of the United States and jokes about it. And then later in the interview with Bret Baier, who's a reasonably straight person at Fox News, I mean, he has a pretty clear perspective, but he's basically a straight guy. Donald, comes up with, as he always does, new lies. Well, it was just newspaper clippings. No indication those were newspaper clippings by his own words. Donald is the best witness possible for the government in this case. One of the regulars on MSNBC, who's a lawyer, said that Donald had joined the prosecution team because jurors are, under the court rules, jurors are going to hear all of this. They're probably going to see his promises that I mentioned. They're going to see the law that he signed. They're going to hear the tape. And on top of this, the other problem he has is lying and denying. So Donald keeps saying, Joe had 18,000 boxes. No, he didn't. He had a bunch of material, but it wasn't 18,000 or anywhere near that. And he immediately turned everything over. Mike Pence immediately turned everything over when they found they had things. Barack Obama, same thing. Now, that tells us that we have a very sloppy system for tracking documents once they're turned over to the White House. And that is something that's more than appropriate for Congress to investigate. I mean, your local lending library does a better job of keeping track of documents.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah. And then the other thing in this, Kim, is his own lawyers are going to be testifying against him at the trial because the judge held that those lawyers, particularly Evan Corcoran, had destroyed the attorney-client privilege, which is quite sacrosanct and very difficult to break, because they were engaged in furthering criminal conduct, and you're not allowed to do that. You can't meet with if you're a mobster, meet with your lawyer and say, we got to rub out Kim McAllister before she can testify against me. That destroys your attorney-client privilege. But, Donald has no sense of rules, propriety. He believes whatever he does is inherently proper. He wants to rape you. Well, he's not raping you. You asked for it. You wanted him, and it's his right.
He said today that he believes the tape actually exonerates him. He will find a way to flip it and, say what he wants about it, no matter how damning it is. And I was kind of poking around to get other perspectives. I found this headline on the Huffington Post today. It says, dead to rights. Legal minds say damning new Trump audio should mean prison. Yeah. Is this tape, does it have him dead to rights?
Oh, yeah. And especially because it's the icing on the cake of much deeper material. Donald's only out. He has 2 outs, I guess. One is he has this judge that he appointed who literally wrote in the original oversight of the FBI execution of a search warrant that he was special and deserved special treatment under the law, which is, in my view, a violation of her oath of office. But she's going to be the trial judge as of now. And so his one hope is that she will, after the trial begins, declare that he's innocent, and that's an unappealable decision. It's over at that case. His other hope will be that he gets a ringer on the jury, someone who will say, yes, I will follow the law as instructed by the court, regardless of my personal feelings, and will then try to hang the jury. Now, we have a method for dealing with this. Normally in a criminal trial, there are two alternates if it's going to last more than a day. Mm-hmm. And this trial will probably have four alternates, would be my guess, because it's going to go on for a while. And a judge can replace a juror and tell the jurors to restart your negotiations. So one hope is, hang the jury. And the other is that this judge, who has already demonstrated her bias, will undertake an action that's not appealable to protect him. That's why it's important that the other two federal grand juries, one investigating the January 6th insurrection and the other the fake elector scheme, also bring indictments, because now you've got three federal forums. You'll have Fulton County, Georgia, which I'm sure there will be an indictment of Donald there. And you have the existing indictment, which will be superseded, I believe, by a further indictment in Manhattan. If Trump gets into the White House, he can shut down these investigations, but not the state level investigations. And then one last point, Kim, Donald's going to delay on trial. By federal law, I wrote about this months ago at DC Report. I discovered some people are now writing about it. Federal law requires you attend your criminal trial. If you don't attend it, you can be tried in absentia, but judges also can order your arrest. So it is entirely possible that Donald will spend his daytime hours from 10 to 4 sitting at a defense table, and from 4:30 till whenever he gets tired, campaigning by Zoom.
But I wonder if it's a case of then, having the publicity around the trial act as his campaign.
That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
But here's the problem with that. Donald is appealing to a narrower base, a shrinking base. And there are lots of Republicans, you can see them interviewed on TV every couple of days, who go, well, I like Donald Trump, but I'm tired of all this "it's all about me" drama.
Yeah.
And, the Republican Party, which marketed itself for decades as the party of law and order, that's the Nixon era phrase, we're the party of law and order, is now the party of attacking law enforcement. And that includes the IRS. They want to defund the IRS. Who's the IRS? They're the tax police. Who's the SEC? They're the securities police. The FDA, they're the food and drugs police. And they have become astonishingly anti-law enforcement. And there are a lot of principled Republicans who will be really upset about this. I often think about the fact that my late father-in-law, who was for 8 years was in charge of all foreign litigation of the United States of America at the Justice Department, was a very, very right-wing guy. He would be tearing what was left of his hair out over this, because he's a principled person. And we have to keep in mind, there are lots and lots of principled Republicans. They've just been pushed aside by the crazy caucus, MT Green, which, by the way, rhymes with Thorazine, Lauren Boebert, Crawford, Hawley, those folks.
You mentioned the Department of Justice, and there was a story that I saw that I wanted to bring up to you regarding the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, now threatening to impeach Attorney General Merrick Garland. I wonder if you think this is hot air. The story from Huffington Post is that McCarthy wants to impeach Merrick Garland over Hunter Biden. The Republicans zeroing in on an allegation that the Justice Department wouldn't allow charges against Hunter Biden outside of Delaware. And for that reason, Garland should be impeached, according to Kevin McCarthy.
Well, a couple of things about this. The House can impeach with a majority vote. They would then need 2/3 of the Senate to convict. And just as Donald Trump was impeached twice, and Bill Clinton and Andrew Johnson, there were no convictions. Secondly, the prosecutor in the Hunter Biden case was the Trump-appointed U.S. attorney for the state of Delaware. Mm-hmm. And he was left in place by Joe Biden, And Merrick Garland said, as soon as he became Attorney General, we will not interfere with this investigation. That prosecutor wrote to Jim Jordan, the non-lawyer chair of the House Judiciary Committee, that he had a complete free hand to do what he thought should be done, and he brought what he thought were appropriate charges. And the fact is, Hunter Biden was a tax cheat. We only convict about 500 or 600 people a year of a tax crime in this country, in a country where there's just individual tax returns about 160 million. So that tells you what a tiny minor activity it is. And almost all of those charges involve being a major drug trafficker, bribing a public official, or being a public official who took a bribe. So if anything, he was perhaps treated a little more harshly than most people would be, but that's fine. You know, you break the law, you you face the penalties.
Sure.
And the gun charge against him is that he attested on a form that he was not a drug user and he wasn't a drug addict, and he bought a gun. Well, I've been waiting for the NRA to scream that this is a violation of his constitutional rights, that this is overreach by the government, and I would hold my breath, except I actually need to breathe. So, and there's nothing there with Hunter Biden. I mean, Hunter Biden is screwed up. He's made a mess of his life. Yeah. Joe Biden hasn't done anything to stop him. Hannity played a voicemail they somehow got a hold of, probably by hacking. And we all know that Rupert Murdoch's organization has been found several times to have illegally intercepted people's voicemails from their telephone systems. And you listen to the thing, and you know, I'm fortunate I didn't have kids with drug problems, but if it was one of my kids, I would have said just about what Joe Biden said. You know, listen, I know you're having trouble. Right. I love you. We all love you. We care about you. You need to man up and do the right thing. We'll help you if we can help you. I mean, it's a fatherly expression of love. And Sean Hannity wants to turn this into Biden is a monster, which tells you the depths to which Rupert Murdoch's organization has sunk, and how the Republicans, who used to be the party of ideas, have just reduced themselves to the Donald Trump cult.
That's sad.
It is. It's very sad for the Republic, because we need to have competing parties that have ideas that we can learn from.
I would like to think that, like your father-in-law, and like we saw, you know, during the changeover of power, where we saw people in Georgia, Raffensperger stand up, Pence stand up in the moment where he was needed, other states as well. I feel like people in other states, I should say, I feel like there are stand-up people that are Republicans. And why can't they come forward? Why can't it be? Why do you see the Liz Cheneys being voted out instead of being held up to say, these are the people we want, the people that have character, that put the party or put the needs of America before themselves? Why can't these people be the ones that are celebrated?
Well, based on my own talking to people like this and what other people have written, you have maybe 20 to 25% of the adult population in this country who believe that everyone is corrupt. All the news is corrupt. There's no difference between the New York Times and MSNBC and the Democratic Party, that when Trump calls all the people opposing him communists and fascists, which is a little contradictory, that he's right about that. And they're completely disillusioned. And I wrote a trilogy of books, which are holding up my laptop right now to talk with you. Free Lunch, Perfectly Legal, in the Fine Print, explaining why the bottom 90% of Americans have done so badly under both Republican and Democratic presidents since the end of the New Deal. And the New Deal ended on January 20th, 1981, when Ronald Reagan took office and promised that he was going to, allow the job creators and entrepreneurs to enjoy the fruits of their labor. And they have. Unfortunately, the rest of us have been getting sour fruit since then. So you're not dealing here with rational, thoughtful people. I just got an email just before we went on the air from a very wealthy Texas businessman who emails me from time to time, saying that the whole Trump prosecution is bogus because he didn't share those documents with any spies from another country. Well, the Espionage Act is probably badly named. Lots of laws are badly named, but there's no requirement to show documents to anybody to be in violation of the provisions of the Espionage Act, which are to secure national secrets.
Yeah.
So but it is a minority of people, Kim. And why aren't more Republicans standing up like Liz Cheney? Because in the primaries, they get voted out right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, for the time being, I don't think that will change. If in November of next year, the Republicans are routed in the House and possibly the Senate, the Democrats have a very tough calendar with who's up for election. But in the House, there should probably be a big rout of Republicans. Maybe rational, thoughtful, business-oriented, liberty-oriented Republicans will step up. But for right now, you know, the Republicans are the party of anti-law enforcement, anti anything that doesn't go where Donald Trump wants. And
anti-truth, I would argue.
Oh, no, absolutely. And of course, remember, for a long time, all the Republicans on the Science Committee were people who rejected science, just flat out rejected science. So, I mean, it's really very tragic. And what I worry about, Kim, in the long run is that the latest national literacy survey shows that 54% of Americans, so more than half of Americans, read at the level of a sixth grader or below, and about 1 in 5 read at the level of a fifth grader or below. If you're only reading at the level of a 12-year-old, you don't have critical thinking skills. You have a very hard time interpreting anything that's complex or subtle. We don't start having kids generally read novels until they're in maybe 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. And even then, many schools now have stopped giving kids novels to read because parents object to the work. And sometimes they show them movies, and sometimes they have them read one chapter or a book about a novel. And going forward, as the world is going to be more and more complex, you can like it or dislike it. The reality is the world 10 years from now will be vastly more complex than it is today. People don't have critical thinking and reading skills, then they're easily manipulated by demagogues and people with foul intent.
It's interesting you talk about critical thinking, and I want to talk to you about DC Report and a story that talks about Vladimir Putin. But just because you mentioned kids and critical thinking skills, I always have my kids take at least one class over the summer. I know, bad mom, right? But there's this thing called the brain drain, where if you're not using your brain, you're not doing math, you're not thinking, then you start the new school year, way far behind from where you left it the year before. And so I signed my son up for this critical thinking class on outschool.com. And they take up like a topic, what would happen if there was no gravity, right? And then you have to go through and organize your thoughts and do this, critical thinking exercise. So it's just, I recommend it. So for people that have kids or grandkids, just one of those things that can help.
I mean, it's not reasonable to expect that most people are going to grow up to be intellectuals or part of the intelligentsia. And most people are not going to go to college, although far more do than in the past. But I think it's entirely reasonable to expect people to be able to read at 12th grade level, the level of an 18-year-old, to have some critical thinking skills. But reading is really seriously becoming a lost art in America. And many, many people beyond me who are well qualified to talk about this have written about it, talked about it. I just came back from the annual conference of investigative reporters and editors, which I'm a former president of, in Florida. We had about 1,350 journalists. And one of the awards we gave out was for an NPR investigation into, this isn't the title of it, but essentially, why can't Joan and Johnny read? And showing some just ridiculous reading techniques that have gotten into the schools. And on the other hand, you have lots of parents who complain that their kids shouldn't have homework. Why are you demanding they read a novel? Because we've developed this belief that being educated is something wrong with that? I was on a Buffalo radio station. I live an hour's drive from east of Buffalo, on a Buffalo radio station, a conservative station one day, when a guy comes on to ask a question, he goes, "You're one of those elite." And I went, "Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. That's like one of the best things anybody said to me." He said, What are you saying?" I said, you called me an elite. Yes, I did. And I said, sir, that's a wonderful compliment. I said, I'm going to guess you don't know what that word means. You might want to look it up in the dictionary, or if you have a computer, put it into the computer. But especially given the circumstances from which I came, thank you, sir. I'm honored. And then we got rid of the caller. But yeah, people who, they have no idea what they're talking about. I mean, you can't be a communist and a fascist at the same time. And yet Donald, attacks everybody who's against him, because that's the issue to him is I'm the perfect person. I make perfect phone calls. No one else is qualified to be president.
No. Let's talk a little bit about DC Report, the organization which you, I believe, co-founded.
Co-founder emeritus now, but go ahead.
Well, look at you. The headline reads, it's an op-ed piece, Putin's regime is over, an analyst says, and something new is starting in Russia. Although I would argue we saw this little uprising really smash down within just a couple of days. And now, despite an agreement for this military leader who said he was going to march on Moscow and then made an agreement, Putin says all the organizers are going to be facing justice. So does it show the way Putin handled it that he's stronger, or is he in trouble because there was even a challenge at all?
Well, first of all, I think the most important thing to understand is that when the Wagner Group took over the southern headquarters of the Ministry of Defense and then got within about 70 miles of Moscow, that this was a mutiny. This was not a coup. This was a mutiny. And Prigozhin, who was the hot dog vendor turned murderous billionaire thug, Prigozhin was.
I mean, if you had written that in a novel, I would have found it laughable.
Oh yeah, no. If you'd written about Donald Trump's rise to the presidency in 2000, my publisher would have said, that's ridiculous.
It's too much. Yeah.
True life is always more amazing than anything we think up in fiction. But Prigozhin was very clear that he wanted to get rid of the head of the defense ministry and the chief general because he felt they were incompetent and that they had attacked his troops and denied them ammunition. It was a blunderously dumb move. He's got about 50,000 people in the Wagner Group, but he only had 25,000 in Ukraine. And in all likelihood, Prigozhin is a dead man. I mean, it may take a while, but Putin will have him assassinated, regardless of what he said. And if he stays alive, he's going to spend an enormous amount of money trying to protect himself and make sure that nobody in his inner circle is paid off by Putin. Putin is like Prigozhin. He has no problem killing people for his own benefit. This has destroyed the myth that Putin is an all-powerful leader. And I think it will take time to play out. But there are many people in Russia who are obviously dissatisfied with this war. They see it as pointless. There's been a few things said in the last few days on state television along those lines. And I think that Putin is no longer in absolutely firm control. Whether he'll continue to be in control or something will happen, I don't know. But don't wish for him to be gone, because the next guy likely to succeed him and the several other people around who are the short list, they're worse than Putin. Putin is...
That's pretty scary.
Yeah, well, this is because the whole post-Soviet Russian culture, unfortunately, when we thought, good, the Cold War is over and now there'll be democracy, and no, the Russian society was never inherently democratic. We forget that part of the reason our revolution succeeded, part of it was because the king sent a third-rate general, Cornwallis, but the bigger reason was we had local democratic government. We had the House of Burgess in Virginia, and we had town councils in cities. So there was a tradition of democracy that was here. And so when we tried to impose democracy on Haiti, completely failed because there's no tradition of it. Russia has no tradition of democracy. And Putin is willing to use any means necessary to maintain his position in power. But I think he is destabilized. I think we should be very worried about that destabilization. And the one thing Prigozhin did for Putin that I think he lost the opportunity to take advantage of, just like the Republicans on January 6th had the opportunity to get rid of Donald Trump, and they held it until January 7th when they turned into cowards. By blaming the Minister of Defense and the Chief General, Prigozhin gave Putin an opportunity to say the whole war in Ukraine is screwed up and it's their fault and have them shot. He sided with them. He protected them, maybe because he's afraid of them. We don't know, but he stood up for them. And so the war is going to continue. The West needs to maintain its support for the Ukrainians. And of things that are unbelievable, Kim, if somebody had told me when I was in high school in California in the 60s, the day will come when Republicans will side with the Kremlin against the United States' own intelligence and other government services and say, I'm for Putin and be in support of aggressive action by the military action by the Kremlin, I would have gone to the office and said, you got a teacher who's crazy. You need to get sent for a psychiatric evaluation. But that's what's happened. Yeah. Republicans are no longer they can't have no claim to being a party of liberty and freedom. They want to control your body. They want to. They don't care if you get killed by a crazy person or a perfectly sane person with an AK-15 or similar gun, an AR-15 or similar gun, and we should be worried about that too. We need to maintain our resolve to support the Ukrainians because that's supporting liberty. And if Ukraine falls, well, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Moldova, Hungary, Romania, Poland, they'll be next.
Our time is over, but there's one question I'm burning to ask you. Yep. Because in the last couple of days, we've seen court rulings come from the Supreme Court about gerrymandering, about redrawing congressional lines in a couple of states. Today's ruling came out of the Supreme Court regarding North Carolina, right, about a congressional district map that would heavily favor Republican candidates. The justices says the North Carolina Supreme Court was acting within its authority when they concluded the map constituted partisan gerrymandering under the state constitution. I believe Louisiana was another state where this happened. The Supreme Court seems to be falling on the right side of this. What do you think of it?
Well, there's two issues here, and let me just remind the audience, I'm not a lawyer, but I've taught law for 15 years at Syracuse, legal theory and principle currently. First of all, the court is paying deference to state governments and state constitutions in these decisions. That might not be true in another state, but Louisiana and Alabama and North Carolina cases all are crucial to the state constitution. Secondly, in the Alabama case, the lawmakers just said on the record all over the place, we're redrawing these districts so black people won't have a representative in Congress. And the court is not going to stand there and say, oh, that's okay. In other words, keep your mouth shut about what you're really up to.
Right.
So these decisions don't particularly surprise me in that regard, but they're also, the court is sending a signal, go back, redo this, come at us with a different approach, and you can succeed in your cause. Because we've always had a politicized court. This notion of the court is just, this wonderful neutral body is nonsense. Her very first words as a Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is turning out to be a really first-rate justice. I mean, right up there with Oliver Wendell Holmes. She said in her first meeting, several of the justices talked about the Constitution is race neutral. And she said, the Constitution isn't race neutral. It is full of race. It is full of repression of people and having to pass rules to protect people. And we've now gotten off, I think, pretty much this discussion that the Constitution has nothing to say about race. And the other good thing they did was they rejected today this, in my view, crazy legal theory that state legislatures are beyond review when they take actions. Yeah. And the court made it clear, no, everybody is accountable. In fact, the only people in the United States in government at any level who are unaccountable, except by impeachment, are the justices. And we know that at least two of them are clearly corrupt, Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas. And I hope something happens, because they should not be serving on the court having lied and denied about matters in which they had a financial interest, in which, even without an interest, any other judge in America would have been disrobed by the authorities.
No, they really tarnished the Supreme Court. It's a very bad look. Yeah. David Cay Johnston, I am so grateful for you coming on the show. People can find more of your writing. I see that there's an article of your expose on the Trump crime family here at dcreport.org. And of course, you've got a lot of books out there, and I plan to get them and read them because I love our discussions and I can't wait to dig in.
First one you should read is The Making of Donald Trump, which came out in 2016, and it tells about the 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old children Trump plied with liquor limousines and hotel rooms so they would gamble. And, you know, you can't mistake a 12-year-old for a 21-year-old. I mean, think about this in terms of a rape case. You know, were you statutorily of age to give consent? A 12-year-old? Nah, nobody makes a mistake about that. And about how he was involved up to his eyeballs with a major international cocaine trafficker for whom he was in business, and did the most extraordinary favors that only make sense if they were in business together. So
I mean, wow. The Making of Donald Trump. I'm going to read it, and I can't wait to talk to you about it.
Take care.
Thanks for being here.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.